Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO Targeting series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. More specifically, in this instance, the work in progress Sega Saturn Core. Because when I did the head-to-head Virtual Fighter 2 MiSTer versus real hardware comparisons, you wanted to see Dead or Alive, you left me those comments, so that's what we're going to be doing today. Because this is another game that had slowdowns in previous cores, and they seem to be 100% fixed. Before we get too far involved, though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. Well, we're starting off with MiSTer FPGA footage here, and we're going to move into actual hardware, but I would say Dead or Alive was the game that presented the most slowdown in weird instances, and it seems like if you pick Kasumi, that was the easiest way to trigger that slowdown. Before you make the joke that it is because of the jiggle physics, maybe it could be because of the jiggle physics. No one really knows why it was happening, but that seems to be the popular opinion. Now we're moving over to a direct hardware capture as well, and just so you know, these are both going through the RetroTink 4K to get into a capture card. Andy D captured the real hardware on his side, and I did MiSTer FPGA, only because my cable is wired up for JP21, because I got it a long time ago to use my frame MiSTer. Now that you've seen both sources back to back, we're going to do a side-by-side here and see if you spot any instances of slowdown on the MiSTer FPGA side of things, because to my eyes watching this footage, playing everything, I cannot see any fundamental difference between the two sources. They are running at the exact same frame rate. I don't see any slowdown on MiSTer FPGA. This is just Dead or Alive no matter how you slice it. Whether you're on an FPGA recreation of a Sega Saturn or whether you're playing on real hardware, they feel one-to-one identical to me, and that is always exactly what we're looking for. Obviously the matches don't end at the same time, they are two different matches. Moving back over to the MiSTer FPGA side of things, everything here just looks spectacular. The clarity on the screen, the interlacing, all of the motion of the characters, the animations, the frame rates. This is what you want Dead or Alive to feel like if you're not playing the Model 2 original, because the Sega Model 2 definitely is the de facto best way to play this game, even if we do these comparisons on MiSTer FPGA, and it is an excellent port. Now moving over to the original hardware again, you basically see the exact same image except a little bit duller, but there was a tiny bit of slowdown there in Kasumi's floor kick. Go back and rewind if you didn't notice it. This basically is showing you the point that the real hardware will slow down in certain instances as well. So not every single instance of potential slowdown that you see on MiSTer FPGA is going to be because it is in the FPGA code. This game can definitely slow down every once in a while for a frame or two, and you saw it a little bit here in this fight, and you didn't see it on the MiSTer FPGA side of things, so that is a difference, just a very interesting and observable one. Let's again go side by side, MiSTer FPGA on the left as well as real hardware on the right, and go ahead and pay attention to the overall cadence again. You might see a tiny bit of slowdown in either screen, but you're going to see it basically replicated across both screens. That really is the main takeaway from this test. Dead or Alive can slow down, but right now if it does slow down, it's doing it in the exact same way on MiSTer FPGA as it does on the real hardware, and some matches, depending on who you're fighting against or using, don't have any slowdown at all. So there definitely is something in the code of the actual game in and of itself running on Real Saturn hardware or on MiSTer FPGA where you can get a few instances of slowdown, and there seems to be characters you can pick and fight against that will never have any slowdown whatsoever. So maybe it really is some of those jiggle physics. Maybe they're stressing out the Saturn in some strange way. It really is an interesting question to ask. And now that we're back onto real hardware again, look for any slowdowns here, because I did not see any single instance of slowdown on the MiSTer FPGA side of thing, and I really don't feel any instance of slowdown here either. Maybe it's just something about the backgrounds, maybe it's something about the playfield, maybe it's something about the animations of both characters being loaded into RAM at once. It really is hard to say. And just so you know, all these tests are being done on the dual RAM core at this point in time, and before you ask me down below whether or not you should upgrade to dual RAM, just wait until the core is done. Odds are, based upon what SRG320 has communicated, that you're going to want dual RAM for the fighting games, but again, just wait for the core to be fully developed and finished, and then make your buying decisions. Don't run out and rebuild your MiSTer today for 6 games. Wait and see and decide if you want to do that. And you'll see again on a side-by-side comparison, these look like they are identical sources. The only difference is the gameplay is different because it's two different people playing. Let's do a sound comparison as well. We've got MiSTer first, real hardware second.
Get ready. Get ready, one!
I mean, being a filmmaker and a cinematographer for a living, I am way more set up to look at the visuals and compare those, but as far as the audio is concerned, I think they're one-to-one absolutely doing the exact same thing. Now, watching the same match side by side, again, MiSTer FPGA on the left and Real Hardware on the right, it does again feel like an identical experience, and you did see some slowdown on the Real Hardware side of things, and you will very shortly see some slowdown on the MiSTer FPGA side of things. It even seems to be move dependent. Some moves have a propensity to have a tiny little bit of lag more than others, and that really is interesting. But as far as the variables of any sort of slowdown are concerned, they seem to crop up in the same instances and at the same regularity or lack thereof on both MiSTer FPGA as well as Real Saturn hardware. And again, like I always say, you want these cores to do the exact same thing as hardware. And when I say one-to-one, some people leave a comment down below and say, well, it might not be perfectly cycle accurate, and that is true. But if you cannot tell the difference, if the human mind cannot actually discern it, then does it really matter? If the cycle accuracy difference is just a math issue, it's just something that shows up on a test but not to you, is that not one-to-one as far as your perception is concerned? Maybe a little bit of a philosophical question, but you answer that down below. Now back on MiSTer FPGA again, this just looks great. The new interlacing fixes on direct video, the overall motion clarity, and the visual clarity on HDMI, even on direct video, look spectacular. And if you consider FPGA quote-unquote real hardware, and again, that's a debate you guys can have in the comments, this is the prettiest looking Sega Saturn you're ever going to be able to use. And don't get me wrong, RGB on real Sega Saturn hardware I think is the best RGB ever put out of any console ever made, but getting HDMI out of a Sega Saturn just really isn't a thing. Now moving over to the old captures, this is from the previous core on MiSTer FPGA. You were just going to see the slowdown as way more endemic here. It's going to pop up more, there's going to be more of a drag to some of the animations. It isn't still the worst thing in the world, but this was the dual RAM core previous to this version, and I definitely saw a lot of differences between the two. There's definitely improvements here on this most recent core, and just so you know, you do have to go in and manually install it from the Unstable Nightlies channel on the MiSTer FPGA Discord. I will update a Saturn video when it goes to update all, letting everybody know. So if you're not in the manual installation business, as in you don't want to do that, then you just have to wait around for these to come to update all. But knowing everything you know now, this is one source. It's either Sega Saturn or it's MiSTer FPGA on the most recent core on the dual RAM build. Pay attention to everything you can see in the frame, pay attention to the cadence in the animations, the frame rate, the overall brightness, everything else. Soak up all that visual information and leave me a comment down below. Is this MiSTer FPGA or is this real Sega Saturn hardware? And I did choose to use a little bit of a darker stage, that way I could trick you, just to make sure there wasn't anything too bright on the screen that you might be able to ascertain the brightness levels of MiSTer versus original hardware. So this one could be a little bit tricky, but I feel like maybe 7 out of 10 of you are going to get this versus the virtual fighter comparison, where I feel like that was basically a gimme in the responses. But the good thing is, if I think I can quote-unquote fool you and get you to guess wrong whatever you guess, that means if this is MiSTer FPGA footage, it is so incredibly accurate in replicating the real dead or alive experience so well that I'm able to actually feel like some of you are going to guess this wrong. But now knowing everything you see here again, leave me that comment down below and you tell me MiSTer FPGA or an original Sega Saturn via RGB. That's the current situation with the current core as of the recording of this video, but you never know, maybe things have changed since then because the core gets updated regularly, and if you do get a new core and there are some regressions, don't be surprised by that at all. Honestly, there are a lot of regressions in the development process, and that's to be expected, but sometimes I get comments saying there's been a problem since the last core, and that is normal. But sure, that leave me a recommendation on the next comparison to do down below, but we are done, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.